we think her input would be fantastic if Councillor Hall would like to take that nomination up.
After discussion, was it Thursday night? I did have some further thinking on it, and I will accept that if the council chooses.
In that motion, it's sitting with Councillor Watson. Councillor Watson, what I'm thinking is item 2, if we actually insert the 2 councillors there, do we need to predetermine the chair, or can we do that at a later date? We'll do that at a later date, but we insert the names Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty. Yep, Councillor Watson, are you happy with that? Councillor Quilty is the seconder. Are you happy with that? So the adjustment is to item 2 there to include the names Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty. Yep. Other councillors, is there any other comments? Otherwise, I'm going to give it to Councillor Watson for close. Anything to close, Councillor?
Madam Mayor, I think it's just really great that we've got a couple of councillors who want to stand up and work with our community. And now I put the issue out to our community that we can get some really fine people out there who will work for our city and our community for the rating strategy and keep this process rolling along. And as mentioned earlier, it is a lot of work, but very rewarding in the sense that we'll get great outcomes for our city.
Watson, Councillor, motion, excuse me, motion is there before you. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.3, as there is no conflicts of interest with the budget, that lapses. Councillors, 8.4 is the council plan adjustment. The recommendation is there on page 32. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Lowe.
This is part of the process, really, but it's a good way for us councillors to track the staff and the council as a whole on what our community have asked for in our council plan and our strategic resource plan as well, on what we hold the CEO and a team accountable for. And if you read this report, they are tracking mighty well at the moment. So through you, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to say good job, CEO. It's looking good. Thank you.
Councillors, just quickly before we go back to Councillor Lowe, if he's got any close, this is a working document that the council plan provides, and it is something that you're absolutely spot on, Councillor Lowe, that we reflect on as councillors. In fact, we're responsible really for 2 things, the council plan and the council budget, and it comes down to that. So making sure that this document is the most up-to-date, it reflects the things that are in not only our budget but also our thinking, giving it clear definition and defined for our community to be able to read and understand should they so choose, is essential. So great comments. Councillor Lowe, anything for close? If not, I'm going to put the motion. No, councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.5 is the draft 18-19 budget. Councillors, you have the tabled item there, which has the recommendation points 1 to 7 on it. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Lowe.
A lot of this work into this draft budget that us councillors working with the exec team and the community happened before the Ombudsman report was handed down. So it didn't really give us enough time, in my opinion, to implement in its first year the Ombudsman's recommendation. So I felt that we didn't have enough time to go to the community and find out what we need. I thought it would be unfair on the community to ask that. And we'd been fairly prudent with our fiscal management in this budget anyway, up until that point. We had a waste management levy drop of $12.20 anyway in this particular budget, and an overall rise of 1.57. So it's about $35 to per ratepayer. So I think we've been fairly stringent and fiscally responsible in handing down this draft budget, but what it is a draft budget. So we're handing it back out to the community to take on board their feedback for it and see if there's anything that we've missed or something that they'd like taken out in that. That'd be it, thank you.
So the rates breakdown in this draft budget, rates and curbside garbage collection is at the state government rate cap, which is 2.25. The waste management levy will drop by 2.1, which is $12.20. So that means the overall rates and charges will rise at 1.5. Within this budget, I'm really excited to see us doing the final stages of probably one of the biggest projects we've undertaken recently, which is the CBD Reconstruction. So this is a draft. And I think because not only are we going out with our draft budget, but we're also going to go out with some options about how we implement the Ombudsman's recommendations. I think we will get more people than ever involved in our consultation process. That'll be really exciting to hopefully have even more people than ever go through our budget and decide what they want for Wodonga going forward.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I would just like to take the opportunity firstly to thank the staff. This is not just an overnight process to get a budget out to the community, which is, as Councillor Lowe said, is a draft budget to our community. It starts back in about November, December, that all unit managers start getting their figures and things in. One thing that I think Wodonga is very unique, and it was shown up with the Ombudsman's report and reporting back and finding information, is that we do have a line item for all our units, and it's very easy to go and see it. It's quite a great process, and I think we should be very proud of that process, CEO and all your staff. And Narelle, I do thank you and all the staff below you bringing this draft budget to the community. As Councillor Lowe did say, we were thrown a bit of a curveball with the Ombudsman's report then to look at what and how we deal with our current budget. And I think it's been very good that we have actually put it out to the community. And I do urge every one of our community members to have a look at this budget and go through it. But some of the great things I can see is, and what Councillor Bennett said, is really to finish, and there will be another agenda item in tonight's agenda about High Street and the last part of the construction. But also I'd like to point out Richardson Park, that's been there. We've been waiting to get that across the other side of the road, and that will be constructed and finished in this year. So there's some really great things. We keep on moving forward, and I think our strong leadership and guidance and showing strategic, and that's one of our roles as councils, is our strategic thinking and moving forward is so important to take our city into the next 10 years, where we have a budget that goes through to 10 years. So, Madam Mayor, I think enough said.
Thank you. Other councillor, worthy of note, Richardson Park isn't paid for by us, Councillor. Councillor Quilty.
All right. As you might be expecting if you've been paying attention, I'm not really a fan of this budget again. I'll start with the highlights. We've brought the waste levy down by $12 and only shifted about $7 of that to rates. So there's a total cut around $5 or $6. The rates are $5 or $6 lower this year than they otherwise might have been. So I guess that's a small win. I was going to say that's probably it for the highlights, but there is the gas gate at Logic. We're spending $4.9 million to install gas access to Logic, which should improve the asset. I see that as probably an investment. So that's all right, I guess. Otherwise, there is spending, new capital projects, growing operational budgets. It's not all bad. Lots of people like the new Main Street. Lots of people like their well-known parks for $5.1 million. Lots of people like their $180,000 of tree plantings every year. It's clearly not everyone because people keep ripping them up, but you can't please everyone, I guess. Yes, I'm constantly told how lean our council budget is. There's no fat. I roll my eyes quietly to myself. I have proposals that could cut easily $1.7 million, which is about what we're looking for with the waste levy. Modest cuts that nobody much will notice. We could halve our tree planting, cut back on the rolling out of duplicated footpaths and new footpaths in established areas. We could axe the incubator startup, cut back on the community impact grants, take a hit to the art budget, maybe cut some of our communications and marketing, $1.6 million budget. I do plan to put up some ideas online in the next few days for anyone who wants to have a look. The waste levy overcharge represents a great opportunity to make one big cut up front and get on with things. Sadly, I don't think we're going to seize that opportunity. So what the budget we're doing now is putting the budget out for consultation. For everyone who's outraged about the levy, who thinks the rates are too high, your opportunity to come back and tell us that you think that. If we don't get the feedback from the community saying they're not happy, then everything will just keep sailing on the way it is.
No, give this to, Okay, the budget. The Ombudsman report has been supported by the majority here tonight, and I accept this. Part 2 of the recommendations was the Ombudsman's report was waste management service charge be implemented within 2 years. Okay, this budget, I believe, will not be what many in the community will be expecting. I think they were expecting a lot more from us, and so they should. It is my view many wanted the waste management levy dealt with in full in this budget, and I believe this would have been achievable. It was what I have wanted to do since being given the details around the levy back in early April 2018 this year. The information was made available to all councillors during the recent discussions and directions of this year's budget. We had time to address the levy in the budget, had we been given the opportunity to. The $12 reduction in the waste management levy, in my view, will be seen as a slap on the face for many of the ratepayers. As I stated before, we had the opportunity to deliver a budget that addressed the levy in full, or if not in full, with a greater amount than what has been delivered tonight. This will now mean the overcharging on the waste management levy will have to be addressed almost in whole in the 2019-20 budget. I do have issues with this because it could be the whole amount moved over to general rate revenue ledger, which we will have to apply for an exemption on the rate cap. That could be considerably a high amount, or in part, but this could also mean high increases for some, depending on how it is distributed. We already are going off a very high rate base now, or it could be moved or renamed and come under another charge, like a municipal charge, either in full or part. Either way, possibility of any real substantial reduction or reimbursement would probably not be forthcoming, I believe. So we have the highest rates, possibly some of the highest rates in Victoria. If you go on the state government Know Your Council website, you'll find our rates are around 500 more than the state average and over 300 more than that of a similar council to us. This difference could be seen to many as the difference between having the waste management levy applied to their rates or not. I feel that the council, in not addressing the waste management levy amount in this budget with some vigour, I would basically be supporting the continuation of the status quo in overcharging of the ratepayer with this levy for the next 12 months, and I don't support this. Should be addressed in the Act. I agree that the definition for what would... Sorry? Anyway. So while I fully do support the Ombudsman report and recommendations, the report given here tonight at council still tries to address over and muddy any of the wrongdoing by council over the many years. The Ombudsman's clearly stated in her report what was done by council was wrong. This report by the council lacks... Oh, sorry, I've lost my paperwork. But anyway, I don't support this budget. I think that it could have been... we could have dealt with it without even having to cut some of the services mentioned. I think the ratepayers deserve to have that, and that's my...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very cognizant of the fact that we've had a resolution passed this evening in terms of a 2-year span to deal with the Ombudsman's recommendation, particularly the first recommendation, and I don't propose to speak at odds to that resolution. However, this budget raises so many things in my mind. Holding on to the waste management levy surplus through at least until next year or perhaps the year after, and then making it, well, what's likely to happen is to make an application to the state authorities to allow a transfer of all or somewhere near all of that surplus amount across through a higher rate rise into general revenue. I don't think that's working for what needs to be done for our community. I think our community have come out very clearly to us and said, you know, take responsibility for this and deal with it. I think we need to be looking at other ways of addressing the funds that would be needed or the funds that we would be losing if we cut the surplus out completely or in part or some combination. Most disappointing of all is that the overcharging the waste management levy will continue this year despite the Ombudsman, the Premier, the Treasurer and the Minister for Local Government declaring it's wrong. The reason that is likely to be given is that we didn't have time this year to deal with it because of the rate capping time to make an application for a variation to the rate cap passing before we got to it. But we've heard it said tonight around the table that we had prior warning as to the likely recommendations that were going to come out in the Ombudsman's report, and we could have acted to some extent at least on that when it was first produced. I find the approach that we're taking here to just be wrong. As overcharging the levy in the first place was wrong, but to continue to do it when we've been told not to do it is concerning. I think we can cut the surplus out now and undertake a service review over the next 12 months across all of council with a view to identify cost reduction, then run a case to support any changed revenue position next year. We could do all those things, and as Councillor Quilty said, there's many things that we could do that would have minimal impact on our operational activities or our recurrent activities. So I urge anyone who believes that council should not continue to charge the surplus amount in the waste management levy to put a written submission into the budget consultation accordingly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillors, I too would like to have comment on this. What's been incredibly obvious to me in the discussion around the table, councillors, is in a previous report that apparently we weren't privy to information, and then in this report apparently we were. I also look forward to hearing submissions from councillors, and I hope that they would have the respect to actually present them to their fellow councillors before putting them on Facebook. Having a look at costs and looking at services isn't just willy-nilly. These services provide essential support and I guess supporting all of our community. So to think that we can just cut and burn, in my opinion, is not only foolish but irresponsible. Tonight's draft budget sees further achievement and this is from both consecutive councils and this council, and the good work we've seen in delivering projects and services to our community, but also further efficiencies and productivity gains. Some $20 million over the last 5 years have been found in productivity gains and efficiencies in the organisation. What you'll also notice tonight is that the actual draft budget is slightly different in presentation. So in actual fact, we've been moving and working very closely with the state-defined improvements. But what we've actually used is the best practice guide that's just been put out in terms of the actual presentation of the budget. In fact, Councillor Bennett and Councillor Lowe, I think when you've attended training, you've actually had commentary that it's one of the best put together financial documents, not only, well, potentially in our state. And I think that that should be reflected back to the CEO and to her staff. That means it's easy to read and legible. So let's talk about the highlights in this budget, because there is many. We're delivering less than the cap rate of a 1.5% increase from base rates. It's an average of 69 cents a week. For the 6th year in a row, there are no new borrowings. We see a continued reduction through responsible financial management of long-term debt to a low of $20.5 million. And I do remind us that we've done this in a process of rebuilding a city. A further reduction to the waste management charge of 4.8%. We continue to work to complete a high standard of asset maintenance, and this has continued to improve with better analytical tools enhanced over the last few years. This means that we can ensure good long-term provision for replacements of such things as roads, bridges, underground infrastructure and other major assets. And we finally see that delivery of the 4th stage of our CBD $20 million project. So unlike our state and federal counterparts, we do take our budget out for comments to our community, and we work with our community. So I encourage people to provide us with that feedback and input, and there's many different methods. So if you want to know more, if you want to be involved, whether you want to come to a face-to-face session or whether you want to do so online, please look at Make Wodonga Your site, because all the information is there. Finally, on behalf of all the councillors, I'd like to thank the staff, because this takes huge extra hours. Narelle, to you and your team, and CEO, absolutely to yourself and to the entire team, because it is a long and arduous process. So thank you, and thank you, councillors, for the countless number of extra hours that you have put in as well. Councillor Lowe, to close.
Just like to echo Councillor Quilty's thing on Gasgate being in the budget. One of the things the community asked for is more jobs, and an investment into Gasgate out at Logic, which, running those numbers again, I think O's is about 6.4 million now out there, and is valued at roughly $40 million. So having a further investment out there to attract more big business just means more jobs for our economy. But we have to spend money to make money. So I, like you, Councillor Quilty, like a return on investment too, and it's projects like Gasgate that excite me as well, because they're income generating. But not everything's income generating. So sometimes some things have a social value too, and they're just as important. So it's finding the balance between income generating and social value as well. Your incubator startup that you could just cut out of the thing, sure you could. But that same incubator startup could have Wodonga's next big businessmen roll out of it. That's what an incubator startup is. They harness, they nurture young entrepreneurs or old entrepreneurs, and they take collective knowledge and have something grow from that. That's the name of an incubator. So whilst it might sound like a $150,000 investment, it could mean $2 million turnover for some business in Wodonga, providing jobs for our young ones. We've got high youth unemployment, and the only way to solve high youth unemployment is to create jobs for them. This is not a household budget that we're dealing with. It's not as easy just to go and wipe stuff out of it and go, let's live with it. Sure, I could take $1.7 million out of it too. But what effect's that going to have on our community? What's the roll-on effect? It's the flow-on. We talk about compounding effect all the time. What is that compounding effect by ripping out $1.7 million out of it? I'm just going to close with the reality is that the Ombudsman has handed down the report. We need to implement that. But we need to do it in an informed, professional manner using logic and good fiscal management and not run on emotion. And that's what I urge my councillors to do, is not run on emotion. Let's have a think about what we're doing here. Thank you.
Councillor's motion is there before us on page 10. All those in favour? Sorry, all those in favour? Thank you. Against? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.6 is the reconstruction of High Street from Lawrence Street to Elgin Boulevard, and this first item is actually for the civil works. It comes in two parts, councillors, and I'm taking it it's given because of the separate contracts. So the recommendation is there on page 43. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Watson.
Oh, Madam Mayor, I'll be pretty quick. This is going to conclude the final build of High Street. I do appreciate the issues we'll have, but I think we'll learn from all our builds in the past where we've made mistakes. We'll improve them and we won't make those mistakes again. We have a completion date of 31st of May, but like the last project, we came in on budget and on time, or earlier than on time. So I hope the weather gods are good to us next year and that we can do this build very quickly and successfully. And I look forward to officially having the whole High Street reconstructed, something that no other community in Australia can do, reconstruct and take remember, it was part of taking the railway out of High Street. So it's a fantastic effort over a long period of time.
All right, I'll just be brief. So it is next year, from January 2019, I believe. I do think the bit that's been done so far looks quite good. There's what's paid involved, and there will be pain, I guess, again, but the end result is probably going to be worth it.
Yep. So we went out to our businesses along there and I gave them two options about when they would like to see the works happen, and 70% of them went with option 2. So it's great to have their feedback. And just before I accidentally say something that's not yet public, Officer Schultz, can you confirm with me that I can make it public about the parking? Or is that... Yep, just cool. So currently we've got 58 car parks. With this new work that's just about to happen, we'll go down to 57. But currently we have 6 disabled parking spots, and with feedback, we've made that up to 7. So that's a fantastic result in terms of parking as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As with all of these projects, there's impacts on our community. There's people that are going to have some tough times to get through. And I think when we look back at the outcome that's happened on the north end of our street, as much as a lot of people might disagree with me, I think the pain's worthwhile. And what we've got up on the north end of the street is quite presentable. And I think most of the community is happy with what's been done. So to do this project, yes, we're going to have a period of time that is going to be very difficult for some of our business houses, and I recognise that on the south end of the street there are a number of food premises and the cafe types of premises that rely on daily traffic that's basically walking past, and it's going to be very difficult for those. And I think whatever we can do to try and support them, we need to be doing. I think the type of things we've learnt from what happened in the north end, we can apply and perhaps learn that it might not be exactly the same. I've spoken to most of, or a number of the food premises in the north side to get their views, and the comment back to me was, yes, we did it really hard for a period of time while the works were on, and some places lost 70% of their income for that period. So we need to recognise that, and we need to acknowledge that this is going to be a tough time for them, But at the other end, when it's all said and done, I think it'll be a good outcome for everybody. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Just pick up on Councillor Meldon then. It will be tough times for all those eateries. But in saying that, there's probably a good opportunity for them as well. If I know anything about construction workers, they eat well. So there's probably a good opportunity to get down the street, and there's going to be a lot of them. But I want to commend the north end. The presentation, the work that got done down there is phenomenal. We'll talk about the addition of a disability car park coming in, which is brilliant too. But if anyone's not aware, the reason why there's no gutters and that now in that north end is the fact it makes the accessibility a lot better. It's for people in wheelchairs, people pushing prams. It's not there just to get water away faster or slower. It's to improve the accessibility and livability in our city. And so once our north end matches that, I think it'll be great. So big thumbs up to the teams that are doing the jobs. I think it's well done. I'm pretty sure a lot of them are local too, so it's money getting generated back through our economy. And option 2 is also a $320,000 saving, which is even better as well. So thank you.
Okay, the best value for money was also the preferred option by the retailers. Hit it with one go instead of the construction being broken up over 2 times. The quicker I believe it gets done, the better, especially for all of the empty shops there, because I think whilst this project isn't done, they will stay empty. I don't think anyone will probably want to rent out of business while this proposal will come on board later down the track. So I think the option chosen by the retailers was the best way to go, and they did a fantastic job in the South Street end, and I expect the same for the Beechworth end. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. It has been said, but Leon, through you and your team, you work incredibly hard to deliver on time and on budget. Can you please pass our thanks back to the team? We have got some more trying times ahead of us, but what we need to remember, councillors, is it's intergenerational. And yes, there is some pain. We are absolutely working to minimise that, and we've clearly already demonstrated some of that, working with the traders to work to their preferred option. So can I also thank the community too, because while we did the northern end, they did step up. They did keep supporting businesses. And we do need to remember that the footpaths will be open. The footpaths will be open. So if your favourite cafe is down this southern end, you can still visit. And I do like your commentary around construction workers eating a lot, because I did see many of them at the coffee places and at the food places. And I think that Greg's did probably pretty well out of those construction workers. So, councillors, back to Councillor Watson for any close. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.7 is the reconstruction of High Street between Lawrence and Elgin Boulevard, and these are for the landscape works. Page 51 is the recommendation. Can I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Watson, Councillor Quilty again. Councillor Watson.
Madam Mayor, once again, the last contract was done to a very high degree of satisfaction, and I look forward to the little artworks, because the echidnas that are in the the north end of High Street are fascinating young kids and people, and so Simone, I look forward to seeing what little art surprises come through the project. It'll be great. Thank you.
All right, just so one brief point I forgot to mention last time. There's always a lot of criticism of prior councillors and staff, but this is, current councillors are happy to take the credit for the good things that have happened in the past. So we should just say that this was a vision of prior councils and councillors and the staff, and they carried it through, and it is good. It looks good. They carried it through despite some opposition, and it was maybe even courageous, and it was good for the town. So I think they deserve congratulations for that.
Councillor Quilty, that's the most endorsing thing I've ever heard you say. Does anybody else have any commentary? Councillor Lowe,
I'm more than ready, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to congratulate the landscape team as well, and not only the civil team. The landscape team's done a great job down there. So Stuart Gordon and his team. But I just want to touch on Councillor Hall's thing on empty shops, and yes, we do have empty shops on there, and no one will take up those shops whilst the building's going on. But what it does is give opportunity for pop-up stores and other businesses to test the market here. You can't have Manns and Woolworths open with all those extra shops and have a complete take-up. I've said it before, a couple of years ago, we looked at putting a store over here on High Street, and at that time we couldn't get it. We couldn't get one of size. What the empty shops do is provide opportunity for businesses to go in, test the market, and there'll be a rent adjustment because of demand. So at the moment, there's a few empty shops, and so the landlords will have to work with attraction on that, and the attraction will be rents. So I look at it as business opportunity. They're not going to fill up overnight. It's just not possible. It doesn't happen anywhere. But I look forward to seeing who comes in there. Thank you.
I need to stop talking. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.8 is the Domestic Animal Management Plan. Recommendation is there on page 57. Can I have someone move it? Thank you. Keen dog owner. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Any other councillors? Thank you, Councillor Watson.
So the Domestic Animal Management Plan, or otherwise it's also known as it's a very attractive name as the DAMP. So this is asking for some feedback on our priorities. So I'll just read out a couple of those priorities. We've got public education, so really anything that increases people's awareness and understanding in decision making, anything to do with council, I'm a fan of. Pet awareness events such as Paws in the Park. This is certainly an event that people have talked to me about. It would be great to see another good partnership with our private sector in this one. Fee reduction for responsible pet ownership. I know something that Councillor Quilty and myself, we've had people speak to us about another off-leash dog park. And also another thing that is in this draft plan is looking at continuing the current tender contract for the pound services. So actually quite a lot in this, in the DAMP.
Madam Mayor, very quick. I'll be looking forward to hear all the public exhibition comments coming back to us, so that we can then move it to final documentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that I find most attractive that comes out of this sort of plan and this document is the encouragement that we give, or that we move towards, for responsible domestic animal ownership and management. There's a long way to go before we get it in total control. I, for one, worry about a lot of our native species, particularly from some cats from time to time, and I think this sort of document, this sort of plan, and the approach that we're taking to these sort of things, albeit small steps, and it's probably a long process, we're heading towards trying to manage our domestic animals in a more responsible manner, and I think every step we can take to do that, we should be applauding it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, look, I think the identified priorities are good priorities. I think education is pretty important, especially with some of the dangerous dogs out there. And just recently, I think on the Facebook, I saw a little dog that was savaged by a bigger dog. And I think we need to educate people for responsible ownership. The reduction in 10% in a year to incentivise that is a great idea. I also look forward to council receiving an audit report from the pound in coming months, I hope. And we can have a bigger look at the picture of how that's performing and where we go with animal management in Wodonga once we've seen that. So, yeah, thank you.
So I'm not much of an animal lover, despite the ongoing adventures of my cat, which I regale the councillors with. I guess pet owners also have a right to parks and for their dogs to play. Yeah. I guess this is an opportunity for people to complain about the pound being closed again, so it's open to all submissions, even them. That's about it.
Thank you, councillors. Why is this plan so important? Probably because the most number of complaints and or community contacts we have is usually around our animals. So whether it be a barking dog or whether it be a loose dog or whether it be just information. What's really interesting is in the last few years we've actually seen the ownership of dogs double. So what does that mean? There is more pets out there. So making sure we have an incredibly robust plan, how we deal with community issues, how we deal with the pesky, noisy neighbourhood dog, how we deal with people and educate them. I think I've heard that word a couple of times now tonight, is absolutely essential. So we have a great team who does fantastic work, but we do need to update this plan. We need to make sure it's relevant and robust to take us forward, particularly with that growth in pets. Back to Councillor Bennett for close. We actually have had Councillor Bennett's dog in one of our sessions. It's very cute. Councillors, the recommendation is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.9, the proposed sale of the former saleyard site. Recommendation is there on page 61. There's 1 through to 5 items. Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe.
This again is procedural. It's a notification going out that for an intention to sell, so it's for community feedback as well. But this is really exciting. If this sale goes ahead, not only will give the community money to use in a more responsible way, but it will also take away, from what I understand, for us to clean up that site would be a cost burden to our ratepayer. So if we can sell this land without being a cost burden to the ratepayer, then that would be awesome.
I agree with Councillor Lowe there. It's a win-win for us if this sale goes ahead, because the clean-up of the block will be not at council's expense. But also it's a long time in the making, because it's been some time now that the saleyards have relocated down to Barnawatha, and having empty blocks of land is not a great thing for our community. So being patient, we've got the right opportunity here, and hopefully it all goes ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The big thing that I see that's potentially to come out of this is an opportunity for a local business to expand considerably and to offer more employment opportunity. It takes a site that has been lying idle for some time and puts it back into productive use. And I think those sorts of things are relatively important in the way we should be managing our city. I think this is a good opportunity to have a really positive outcome from just about every direction you might want to look at it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other councillors? No. Back to Councillor Lowe for close. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.10 is review of the CityLife publication. The motion is there on page 69. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
I think it's really important for us to respond to the ways that our community want to hear from us. I actually don't mind the subscription model that we've talked about in here. I'm very supportive and keen for council to be moving in a more environmentally responsive way, so putting as much information as we can online. But I do understand that there are some people out there who still like to get their hard copies of things. So we'll be looking at reviewing this in 12 months, and I'd like to be exploring going online wherever we possibly can, but also still maybe look at that subscription model for our community members who really do like receiving those paper-based ways of communication.
Madam Mayor, well, I certainly am not a great fan of Facebook all the time, but Madam Mayor, I think we're sort of doing the big circle, and what I like about this is we're having a review in 12 months' time, and so we've gone from having articles in the local Border Mail to having our own publications, one being a glossy, which we're going back to, one we've just recently had the broadsheet style, and it'll be really interesting because how we as a council operate is basically feedback from our community, and I think electronic is a great way to go. But we need that data to know which way you, as a community, like to hear the information from our council. I'm a great one of getting on the iPads and the phones too, but it's not for everyone. But yeah, let's please have your feedback during the 12 months.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm out of step with this. I basically think the printed publication's done its time, and I think we should be knocking it on the head and moving on to electronic versions and perhaps other different ways of getting our information out into the community. And I think basically we should bite the bullet and stop producing a paper copy of CityLife. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well, I actually support Model 2, which is taking it back to, quarterly? Yep. It's a saving of $54,000 over what we do now. Look, there's a lot of people out there that still enjoy the CityLife. I know my husband does. He looks forward to it being delivered in his letterbox, and he said he'd like better content in it though. And I'll work on that one. But I think there are still a lot of people that read it, and I think it's a good way of getting information out there. Not everyone is online, and really it's good to have that information for people that don't get that opportunity to, or have the computers or the tablets to get online. So we still need to look after those people in the community.
All right. I don't support the recommendation because, like Ron, I prefer option 4 or option 5. I like the fact that option 2 saves $56,000 a year, but I like the $73,000 or $84,000 a year savings of the other two options better. CityLife is not really a valued publication at our house. I bring it in from the mailbox and my wife throws it in the recycling. And we're probably not the only people who do that. I don't think ratepayers get value from the money we spend on this. We do need to save. Apparently there is an online email version. I didn't know about that until I read the report earlier. So I went on looking for it. I eventually found the way to subscribe to it, although I haven't got a copy yet, so maybe I didn't get that right. But anyway, I believe pushing the online product more would be a better way to save money.
Councillors, if you'll allow me. It's really interesting. People hear information in very different ways, and you can put it out every way and sundry, and people will still vow and declare they didn't know, didn't hear, and never saw. So CityLife was first introduced and changed to its current format to try and better inform our community, to provide as much information as we could in a different manner. And it absolutely serves a purpose. Does it suit everybody? No. Is it generational? Potentially, maybe not. But our role is to make sure that we continue to talk with our community so that their council, so that the community's council actually hears and is able to articulate information and facts out to our community. So removing it completely at this point for me was not optional, because we know that we have a huge portion of people, Council Hall for instance, who actually enjoys receiving information in this format. So we do need to measure it, but the review is in place. So that happens in 12 months. In fact, I'd challenge you, and if you look around the media tables right around the world, things like Facebook is already talked about being outdated, outmoded, and will be changed within the next few years. So things are changing, they're changing rapidly, but how we continue to talk to our community is absolutely quintessential in the business of being in council. So, councillors, it is another step, but let's review it. Councillor Bennett, did you want to close? Thank you. Councillors, recommendation is before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Item 8.11, Wodonga CBA car parking plan for approval and Wodonga Planning Scheme Amendment C98 car parking plan and parking overlay. Councillor Milton, you have a conflict.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a indirect conflict because my business previously prepared an objection to the CBA and associated strategic planning and amendment documents on behalf of a client some years ago.
Thank you, councillors. The motion is there the recommendation is there on page 75. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Reading this report gave me lots of interesting facts and plan, actually. Like the one in 2012, there was 69 car parking spaces in High Street, and that was moved up to 119. Then this year, we're going from 119 back to 115. We've lost 4 car parking spaces. We have. But the irony about that was people, so whilst this strategy is about the CBA, we've had people commenting on there's not enough car parking spaces in our city. But the actual report tells us that we've got 3,600, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's only at 65 or 75% capacity, if I recall that correctly, at any one time. And there's a certain report that I read that anywhere under 80% capacity is actually oversupply of car parks. So, but where we get the most talk about car parks is on high streets. It's out the front of our shops. Who do we need car parks for? In my opinion, we need car parks for people with disabilities, the elderly, and the people that need assisted walking in somehow. The other people, we've got lots of car parking spaces for them. I've heard people talk about, I ran a store on Dean Street that never had a car park out the front of it for 20 metres. And I ran that for 15 years in that location there. Shops that think they need car parks directly out the front need to have a look at their business model. You shouldn't open a business relying on 3 or 4 car parks out the front of your door. I don't want to be blunt, but that's about as blunt as I can get with that one. What we need on High Street is timed car parking. So they want car parking where you've got people rotating through more often. So my thing was that there was a recommendation for this put in one of the submissions, and I think it's a really good recommendation. How it's policed, how we do it, another story, needs a further review. But the more people, more turnover we can get for these shop owners on High Street, that's essentially what we want. Because at the end of the day, if you've got free car parking out the front of your store and it's taken up by 3 people and they're not there, they go shopping somewhere else for 3 or 4 hours, that allows no one into your store. Loading zones. Loading zones on High Street. Sorry, Councillor Schultz, but it is one of my things. The reason why we didn't have a car park out the front of our store on Dean Street is because we had a loading zone. Yet we had a big loading area at the back of our door. And I look up High Street and we've got loading zones up the back of both streets. So there's all those shops. I think there may be 2 shops on High Street that don't have access from the rear door. And forgive me, I love the delivery drivers, but they are all fit blokes and they wouldn't mind parking around the corner and walking your product around to them. Thank you.
All right. I was interesting reading the feedback we had on the plan. A couple of bits were probably unprintable. We have made changes have been made to the report based on the feedback. Mainly, the priority of various activities were lifted, depending on the feedback. So we did listen. I guess the other thing that interests me is the fee. We're charging an increased fee for waiving car parks. I don't know if I mentioned this last time we talked about this. And we presumably will stack that money aside for making more car parks, possibly even a multi-storey somewhere, so we can be just like Albury. Yes, anyway, there it is.
Madam, I'll be very, very quick on this one. I think this will be, once it goes through, that it'll be a thing that we can continue to review and change, because our city and our growth and our change of everything, and when we did this, we didn't have Havelock Street going all the way through, and we didn't have a Hobble Street, like working as well as it is now. So, particularly at the south end going. This will go through, but I assure you it'll come up again. And when you said there are more dogs issues in our city, I think car parking and car parking that goes with businesses is high up there as well.
Councillors, we're absolutely dead certain, I think sure as eggs, that this is something we will continue to talk about every single year, particularly as our city unfolds. Councillor Watson, you couldn't be more right. This is a living document. This isn't one that then just sits on the shelf. There is plenty going on in our city, and what that then creates is a change in pattern, a change in foot traffic, a change in car traffic, and a huge change in the way that people use the city. So we will have to absolutely have this before us again in another 12 months. We're going to rebuild another part of a road. We're going to see other businesses develop, and we're certainly seeing more and more people come to our city centre. So absolutely we need to keep this document alive and well, and not only work through it, but certainly, and it is right up front and centre, that we do need to ensure that we continue to review and monitor. Councillor Lowe, back to you for any comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The other thing this CBA plan did identify too was cycling into our city, and it's our, one of the big things I hear in our community is about our healthy living and encouragement to provide a city centre for people as opposed to cars. And if we can get people riding in and walking into town and parking away from town, promoting that healthy living, but we need to supply the amenities for it, and that's been identified, that we need our bike racks in town. We need somewhere for them to shower once they come in to work. But the CBA also needs people in here to work. So whilst, and for the people that can't ride in or walk in, the people that do have challenges, they need somewhere to park as well. So it's finding that balance between having both, and I think it does it well. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Mildred. Item 9.1 is the finance report for April. Recommendation is on page 97. Just give Councillor Mildred a moment. Thank you, councillors. The recommendation is there for the report to be received and noted. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Quilty.
All right, I did have a comment written down here, but I'm probably going to skip through it. we're at that time of year again where we're more excited about next year's budget than this year's. My issue was around the permanent versus timing in things like expenditure and staff budgets, but we've had that discussion a number of times over the last 18 months. I think, anyway, so we'll skip over it.
Any other comments? No, councillors, if you just indulge me, I'd like to actually, and it is at this time of the year that we actually do get to see where we're starting to turn out for our year's performance. And I think the CEO and her team should be congratulated on continuing to work to find savings and efficiencies within our organisation and within our delivery. And it becomes very clear and very evident when you see not only are we delivering what we said we would, but we're also managing to do it not only also on time, but also in many instances with savings to be made to then be utilised on other essential items and things for our community. So, CEO, thank you to you and your team, because I know a lot of work goes on to try and find those. And Narelle, you've moved into the hot seat, but well deserved and certainly holding your own. Councillor Quilty, back to you for any close. Councillor's motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.2 is the planning report for April. The recommendation is there on page 100. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a direct conflict as my business had a direct involvement with a client in one of the planning permits that's been granted.
Thank you, councillors. Can I have someone move this? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Bennett, did you have any comments? Councillor Lowe.
It's just an interesting one on page 98. The use the land as an indoor recreation facility, gymnastics and dance studio. Just caught my eye from me now being a dancer. That's all I really had to say.
Was there any other comments other than, comments about Dan in a tutu? No. Rightio. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Did you stick your hand up then, Councillor Lowe? Thank you. Councillor Hall, is this the one you've got a conflict on? Thank you. Item 9.3 is the building report for April. Councillor Hall.
Yes, I have a conflict of interest, being that I have a property in one of the streets where the planning permit for a dwelling is to be built.
Thank you. Councillors, thank you. The recommendation is there on page 104. Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Commentary.
Madam Mayor, it's just nice to see that we're sort of above the line on the community. Community. Thank you. I'll spit that out. But yeah, it is positive just to see it's above the line.
Any other councillors? Councillor Lowe.
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up back on the planning report because it kind of somehow connects to the building report here. That's and it probably just goes to show the growth of the Wodonga, how close that our building permits are back to our previous best year of 2014-15. So we're climbing again. It's that continued growth. Thank you.
Any other councillors? Back to you, Councillor Watson, for close. No further comments. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.4, Competitive Services Report for April. The recommendation is on page 107. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, councillor Bennett. Thank you, councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett.
Yes, I'd just like to highlight one of them on page 106. So that's the installation of pedestrian countdown timers on High Street and Elgin Boulevard. So this is around putting pedestrians first, and we think we're probably the first council outside Melbourne in Victoria to do this. We got the idea obviously from observing what's happening in Albury and making sure we're looking at everything we can do to streamline what's happening in Albury and Wodonga. So with the countdown timers, they increase people's feelings of safety when they're crossing the road. It's also really good for people with mobility issues in a wheelchair or with prams. And Vic Roads and Vic Walks are really supportive of this idea.
I actually saw it over in Turkey when I was over there in 2015, where they had the countdown on a lot of the, and so it's only taken a few years to get it in Wodonga, but look, it is very good because it does give you that sense of time without rushing to get across, knowing how long it's going to take. So people who can dance can dance across it now.
Other councillors, any comments? No. Thank you, councillor Bennett. Nothing for closed. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.5. Lots of reports tonight. The recommendation is there on page 108. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, councillor Lowe. Thank you, councillor Bennett. Councillor Lowe. Councillor Bennett. Other councillors? No. Councillors, it really is just, you want to have a comment, councillor Watson?
Madam Mayor, it's just a great document once again when it does come out quarterly. It's all the work that the council staff put together. It shows us where we're heading, and it's just a good commentary on where we're at.
Thank you, councillor Watson. Saved my voice. Back to councillor Lowe. No, councillors, motion is before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.6. The recommendation is on page 116. It's the National Disabilities Insurance Scheme Transition and Implications. Councillor Lowe, I know you're pretty passionate. You'd like to move it. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Bennett. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I requested this report come up, and the authors of this report have done a brilliant job too. It's been an eye-opener for me. And it got brought about at one of our most recent meetings. We had Upper Murray Family Care request some funding for some assistance to look after, help implement a program to look after some carers, some programs. And I'm going to refer back to the page 113 of the report. And the NDIS is a good thing. I want to start with that. It is a good thing. It's going to be good things, but there's got some holes in it at the moment. And if we look at the 35 disability service providers in the Ovens and Murray, is now down to 15. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So some of these organisations have merged together to help streamline their services. But I'm just going to read some of the ones that have closed. And it's a Disability Attendant Support Services, and they provided respite. The Tipping Foundation, they provided family and carer support. The Upper Murray Family Care have chosen not to be an NDIS provider, and they provide carer respite. And there's been a few of the others that merged together. Basically, from what I'm hearing in the community, is there was a lot of respite services, and say on average someone had the accessibility to get 100 hours of respite care. Because I'm not sure if anyone's aware of anyone's ever had the responsibility of feeding someone with a nasal gastric tube, or working with someone with low muscle tone, or looking after their elderly grandparents in their home. But it comes with huge responsibility and huge time commitment. And what that generally is it's normally sacrificed to their own well-being. And a lot of those provisions that have now not been taken up by some of these NDIS providers has an effect on our community. So after the last meeting, Councillor Bennett reached out to me, even though she voted against it for her principles, she reached out to me to go, well, another part of us as councillors, our role is to advocate. So we're formulating a plan to go and reach out to some of these NDIS providers and find out what other things they're seeing in the community. What are other holes where we can help them advocate for some more state and federal funding. I noticed the Medicare levy, which was going to be used to fund this, is now, they're saying the government says they've got enough money, so let's hope that's true. That's all for now.
As Councillor Lowe mentioned, I think this is definitely something that we can be advocating and being the voice of on behalf of our community.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The NDIS is an absolutely brilliant and probably very, very long overdue addition to our Commonwealth services. And it certainly is one of the most important public policy initiatives for a very long time. However, yes, we need to be advocates for our community, and we need to do the things that we can do, I guess, as local politicians to try and advocate for our community. But at the same time, we need to be extremely careful that we don't fall into the traps that are set by state and local governments in regard to cost shifting and cost transferring things onto local councils. Even though things are really, really valuable projects and valuable schemes and valuable things that we might be invited to fund, it's just too much to say that we should allow cost shifting to continue to happen. So with all this stuff that goes on, we need to be very, very careful that we stay within the advocacy role and that we do it vigorously, but we need to not allow ourselves to be drawn into cost shifting and trying to cover the expenses of those things that the private sector and the not-for-profits have decided they can't or don't wish to supply, because generally it'll be because it's not an economic prospect for them. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is there any other councillors? Councillor Hall.
Yes, I agree with what Councillor Ron Mildren said. I believe in advocating. I don't believe really there's I'm worried about the cost shifting effect from state and federal governments. Look, I'm a prime example. My mother is got dementia, so I know exactly what carers have to do, and it's not easy. And I'm appreciative of Dan's thoughts and his words on it, but I know exactly how those people feel, and I take my view from a person that is not fully in that position, but has part of that position, and I think with time going on, it'll probably become more full-time. But I do believe, though, we need to be mindful of the cost-shifting effect from state and federal governments.
Councillors, anything? If you just allow me, I'm going to come back to you for close. My understanding is absolutely this hasn't been what the report's about. It's actually about understanding what's happening in our community. As community leaders, we're actually responsible for that. Can I just congratulate both Councillor Lowe and Bennett for picking up the cudgels on this? This is a really tough issue. It's not only tough to deal with emotionally but the understanding, because it's actually pretty complex. But supporting people within our community with disabilities and supporting those families is something that we, as leaders of our community, should absolutely be passionate about. So thank you for taking on the role for us as councillors, and thank you for taking the lead on the advocacy. We do have a commitment in our council plan, councillors. Don't forget it. We will leave no one behind. So that includes carers, that includes people with disabilities. So thank you, Councillor Lowe, and over to you for any close.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I started with, NDIS is a good thing. It's given, we've got 169 children, 0 to 6 years old, 450 7 and above. That's 3,170 of Wodonga residents that have identified with a disability and become NDIS recipients, which is quite a fair proportion of our community. But that's also not the number that haven't identified with that. So I'm taking this advocacy role very seriously and not just talking about that we're going to do something. Councillor Bennett's been kind enough to support me in this and led the way on it as well. The NDIS is opened up a competitive marketplace, you're right. And while there is this cost shifting, and I agree with the Councillor Milton, but the problem is in between us advocating for this cost shifting and stopping the state and federal government from directing funds where they need to be directed, there's people falling through the gaps, and we can't just sit by and let people fall through the gaps whilst this is rectified. So that's the main point I was trying to make tonight about the advocacy. I realise it's a competitive marketplace. I realise there's cost shifting, and some of these providers are getting together and doing very good services. But it's more about just bringing the attention to the community that council is not just roads, rates and rubbish. Council is many things, and advocacy and looking after our community is just another one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 10.1 is the status report on council meeting resolutions. There is a correction to be made on the assemblies. Okay, thank you. Item 10.1 is, thanks guys, you've done well. Good job. You didn't wiggle once, I was watching. Item 10.1, status report is for information only. Is there any comments or questions? No. Item 10.2, assemblies for councillors. There was one correction where Councillor Mildren has been listed as a conflict with the disability report. In fact, it was actually for the CBA car parking. That's correct, isn't it, Councillor Mildren? Once that adjustment is made, is there any other comments or questions? Councillors, no. It's for information only. Item 10.3 is the planning for the Wodonga Hills, the Hills Advisory Group. This report is also for information only. Is there any comments? Councillor Mildren or Bennett? Yep.
I certainly understand that this process has gone on for a while, but I think I believe it's absolutely imperative that we get this right in terms of forming the advisory group. We unfortunately weren't able to finish all the interviews, so we'll do that in coming weeks and finalise that to bring that to the next council meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has turned out to be a really interesting exercise, and there's some dynamics and things that we need to be able to work through and get right to be able to get the best outcomes for the overall Wodonga Hills, and try and not focus on particular things to make sure that we get the right people in the right roles. And I think it's the right decision to delay this a little bit so that we can actually complete the interviews, as Councillor Bennett said, and to make sure that we do get the right people in the right positions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from other councillors? Nope. Item 11.1 is councillor briefings, and councillors, unusual, but from the chair I am going to move it, given that it was my motion. Do I have a seconder for this, please? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillors, I'm putting this not necessarily because I actually think it gives us as councillors a better opportunity to improve our decision making, but it certainly improves a perception within our community. Councillor briefings are held every week. We go through huge volumes of work. In fact, this weekend just gone, for example, I had 2 folders and piles of paper, as did we all as councillors. So the volume of work is large. By having these councillor briefings, I hope or endeavour to make sure that information and facts are out there, that councillors, we are absolutely accountable, continue to be accountable for not only our decisions but also our discussions. So, councillors, I put this motion. Councillor Bennett.
I applaud Councillor Speedy for putting this one forward. I think any opportunities to bring more opportunities to community to get more information and understand what's going on is fantastic. I think it's good that we're waiting a couple of months to do this to make sure we've got the right processes in place. So talking to other councils that are doing this and making sure we've got the correct things in place.
Councillor Quilty.
All right, I just wanted to congratulate the Mayor for her adoption of this issue. When I was first elected to council, it was one of the reforms I wanted to see come in. I couldn't find any appetite for it, so I settled to work on live streaming the council meetings instead. I thought that was all we'd achieve during this term, but all it does is take people to change their minds and we get these things through. So will this make it a little more difficult for councillors? Probably. I'll have to watch what I say a bit more in the briefings. I've probably made the odd sarcastic comment that's not appropriate. I'll have to rein that in a little. Is it a silver bullet that will bring transparency back to Wodonga? Probably not, but it's a step on the way. And maybe one day we'll look at recording these meetings as well. I thoroughly endorse the motion.
Other councillors, Councillor Milton. Then to you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, like Councillor Quilty, I congratulate the Mayor for taking the initiative on this. And I see that there's a whole lot of things that we can look at in terms of how this might be structured and put together. And there's many different ways that we can present this, and there's many different ways that we can structure it so that we can deal with issues appropriately. And I think this is a step well in the right direction and we should pursue it. I think there's going to be some vigorous debate as to how this gets structured and put together when it comes back to us at the July council meeting, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Yes, I fully endorse this. Transparency is not just about briefings, though. It's also about the information provided to councillors. So I must emphasise that. We only can make decisions based on the information provided, and we have good faith in our council officers to provide this. But also, the briefings do give a bit of an outline behind some of the decision processes. I agree with Councillor Tim Courty that maybe it could go that step further at some stage, and maybe we might live stream it for people who can't get, because I tell you what, sitting in the audience there for a couple of hours while we go through all the processes, and it's a long time. So I don't think we'll get many here while we have our briefings, and maybe live streaming might be the way to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm going to speak against the motion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong with the Local Government Act, but I'm doing my due representation to community just by turning up to statutory meetings once a month, and I'm going by the Local Government Act, so I could miss all sorts of things and just turn up at meetings. I believe the briefing sessions are a very important way for us to communicate with our staff in a manner that we can speak freely and do things. There is transparency there. You have elected us. If you think we're doing the wrong thing, you won't re-elect us. Simple as that. And I think this is one opportunity, because I know sure as hell as state and federal areas, they don't allow you to go into cabinet and where they're making policy and things like that in a public forum. They come out. So I've had a couple of people in the community come to me and say they would be very hesitant to do a lot of business with City Wodonga if and I know it would be closed, but it's that process. We need to have that ease of the community coming to us with business and open and transparent, but we do need a time and a place we can discuss this before coming to a strategy meeting. That's what the strategies meeting is about, is we bring those information sessions to here. So, Madam Mayor, at this stage, I have to speak against the motion and vote against the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. I think everybody's spoken, so I will take the opportunity to close. Thank you, Councillor Bennett, for picking up that the note is actually to commence in August. It is important that we do get the process right. Not only do we get it so that it actually works and we can get the information through the channels, etc., but also we do comply with the Act as we are required. Transparency is a funny word, isn't it? Overused, probably sometimes misunderstood, and certainly abused. So, in my opinion, and the reason why I'm putting this is to absolutely wipe off the table the notion that there is things going on behind closed doors. There is good work going on. The reports that come up to this community meeting are absolutely discussed, but they are so councillors can actually have a robust and complete understanding via a briefing session, which are absolutely endorsed by the Local Government Act. So, councillors, I hope once and for all this gets rid of that misused word, and certainly will put each and every one of us on notice to make sure that you have read every report before you come to a briefing session and to be able to have appropriate and robust discussion. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 12 is petitions. Item 13 is council seal. Item 14 is urgent business. Item 15, there is question time. I think we have one.
We do, Madam Mayor. Stuart Taylor. Is Stuart in the audience? No, not this evening. The question is, could our water tower in the middle of Wodonga be painted with a mural to depict our military history? It could not only beautify the area, but probably bring more people into our city. Stuart will receive that answer via letter.
Thank you. Now, we don't have any awards this evening, and we do now move to close this next section, which is confidential business, to the gallery. Gallery, please do stay about and join us for a light refreshment post us, just dealing with a couple of items of confidential business. Please, we'll meet you through into the foyer. Thank you. Councillors, can I have someone please move that the meeting be closed to the members of public? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. I take it nobody's going to argue against, so I'll put the motion. Councillors, all those in favour, thank you.
Councillors, can I please have someone, can I have someone move to resume standing orders, please? Thank you, Councillor Watson, Councillor Quilty. Is anybody speaking against that? No, put it to the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That just leaves me to close the meeting. That is a really... Oh, we need to adopt the in-camera recommendations. Councillors, so there is one more item there on page 45, and the recommendation is that we not only close the meeting, but we also adopt the in-camera motions. These are some weird and... Thank you, Councillor Mildred. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Is anybody talking against that? Nope, I'll put the motion. Councillors, all those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried, officially closed, and I will see everybody, well, before June 25th, but June 25th.